going back to your hometown? Raise your hand. Raise your hand. Keep it up so I can just see. Like you're actually moving back. If you're moving back home, okay. If you're staying here, raise your hand. If you're moving to Kauai, raise your hand. You're just gonna stay here. Some people. Now, here's what's impossible. You can't do both. Yeah, seriously. Okay. Let me give you a thought that just absolutely helped me, and this is where I was listening to Rick, and he was so right. And yesterday in explaining this, he was saying, "Hey, everyone's not going to understand what you went through." God has been this year. Who would say, "Man, I'm leaving more on fire for Jesus than when I came"? Raise your hand. Okay, so most of you would say that. The most precious thing you have is that fire that's in you. Who is responsible for guarding that fire? Jesus. And who's the earthly person responsible for it? We are. Yeah. Your parents aren't going to do it. Your pastor's not going to do it. Okay? The person responsible for the fire that's in you is you. So let me explain something that this does not apply for the people that are staying here in Kauai, because you're staying in the community that your life was just impacted by. Okay, so in some ways that's the easiest, but that's not everyone's calling. Okay, and you got to do what God's calling you to do. So this doesn't apply to you guys because you're in the same culture where your life was changed. I went off to college. You heard my story. You heard my story about totally getting on fire for the Lord. I moved out of my church was great people, but it was the frozen chosen, right? I mean, no one, like none of the young people sang when it was time for worship. If you closed your eyes, you were falling asleep. If you raised your hand, you had a question. No one was sharing the gospel. No one was making disciples. No one was doing the stuff of the Bible. So then here's what I thought. I'm going to go home and I'm going to change my local church. Like, I'm going to go and bring that change. And I'll never forget the day that they let me lead worship at my church. And so I ended up leading worship. No worries. You don't need to come in all sheepish. I remember leading worship at my church and thinking, oh, everything's going to change. Like, they're going to taste of, like, true worship. And then next week, we just went back to the same old thing. They even let me preach, but then we went back to the same old thing. And so I actually got so frustrated, and I met with a wise pastor. And I said, hey, what should I do? Because I so want everyone to experience what I experienced. And he said this. I want you to hear this. I want you to write it down. He said, you'll never take a church or ministry past where its leader wants to go. He's like, you'll never take a church. So for you guys that have been here and you're like, man, I am in love with the Anchor House and Kauai Christian Fellowship, that's great, because you have leaders that you're like, I love this. But some of you guys, right, we were just having a conversation, and one of the guys was saying, hey, my church isn't like this. Like, it's an old church, and let me just explain to you that what you are called to do in life, you need to find the people that are running hard after Jesus. You need to find the leaders that are running hard after Jesus, that you look at their life and you're like, that's what I want to be like, okay? Because if you go back and you try to change, you go back and you try to change your pastor, okay, everyone's just going to get frustrated. So instead of you go back and try to change and you're just like, you got to do this, you got to do this. Now, if they're interested, they want to hear, of course, share with them. But what happens a lot of times is you have an experience like this, you get really on fire, and you're like, I'm taking this back to my church. Hey, if they accept it, that's awesome. But if they don't, you're not responsible. You're not the leader. Are you following me? Okay, you know who's responsible for the church? The shepherd that God's put there. So if you end up going back and you're like, this is awful, then don't just go, well, I guess that was just 1 year of my life. No, can I just tell you that there are people all over the world like you. that worship starts and the worship leader, like Nate says, guys, please don't jump up so much because you're going to bust through the roof because you're so passionate about it. And you're like, man, I want to passionately pursue God. I want to make disciples. I want to share the gospel. I want to lay hands on everyone that moves. I want to pray for the sick. Can I just tell you that there are tons. This is what I do in life. I travel around speaking at churches, speaking to young people. There's tons of kids like you. There's tons of people my age like me. So don't get stuck in a place where you're like, these guys don't want to go here, and then you just end up angry and you're angering them. You find the leaders that are running after Jesus. So you guys that are going home, and you get back and you're like this frustrated, okay, you go and find those people that are running after Jesus harder and faster than you, okay, and get with them, and you'll go further than you ever even dreamed. Let me stop for a second. Let's pause. I've given you a lot today. We only have a few minutes left, so I'd like to just do Q&A for our last part of this time. Yeah, Corey.
How long do you say have you been teaching this whole idea?
Of discipleship?
Yeah.
Since I was 21, so 26 years.
And so you've seen a lot of.
The amazing thing if you do this, so what Mark told me that I didn't tell you guys is he goes, Robert, if you'll do this, you'll have a never-ending impact on this campus, whether you stay here one more year or the rest of your life. So I meet people, I travel around the world, and people will come up to me and go, you're my great-great-great-grandfather in the Lord, because this person discipled, you discipled this person discipled this person, this person discipled this person, and this person discipled me. So this very thing, I have people that come up all the time, and there are these people, because I discipled this guy, and he went to this place. The cool thing for me is now we have All People's Church isn't one church. It's about to be 17. And so my disciples have gone and planted churches that have made disciples, and they've sent people that have planted churches. And not just that, I have business guys that have discipled people. So there's people of all different ethnicities. There's people of all different jobs. And they've gone into all these different nations even. So you do that, and you don't need to be a pastor to do this. You just start making, my challenge for you is always have 3 disciples. Some of you have a lot bigger capacity. Some of you could always have 6 disciples. Okay, I try to disciple 12 people at a time. And I'm always teaching them to make disciples. And so it just spreads, and it spreads from my city into other cities, into different states, into other nations. So yeah.
All one-on-one?
Huh?
Is that all one-on-one?
No, I'll do some one-on-one. I do most in groups. Right now I have 2 groups of 6 guys each, and then I do some one-on-ones. Yeah.
So you said 12 at a time, so how long does that discipleship period last before you?
Awesome. Yeah. You know, some guys I've discipled for the past like 20 years, but most it's about a year. So I meet with them, and what I give them to begin with is what I call a discipleship DTR. Have you ever heard of it, the term DTR? Define the relationship. So we were big on this in dating, where you actually define the relationship. Have you ever gone up, seen a guy and a girl hanging out, and you're like, you clearly like each other, and you're like, how long have you been dating? And they go, And they, the girl looks at the guy, and he's like, and you're like, you idiot. You've never asked this girl out. Like, just freaking ask the girl to be your girlfriend and don't just hang out. Like, just man up and have a define the relationship talk. Same thing in discipleship. You actually go to someone, you see that they are hungry for the Lord, and you say, hey, I've been in this training school. We've learned about discipleship. I actually want to make disciples. Jesus said this in Matthew 28, go and make disciples. So I'd actually like to disciple you. You want to pray about whether you want to do that? This is what it would look like, meeting once a week. I'm going to teach you 3 things. We're going to do this together, and then you're going to make other disciples. Is this something you want to do? See how clear that was? So short. You gave a verse, you gave a vision, and you give a call. And then they tell you they want to do that, and then you say, great. Well, let's meet. So, you're back. It's this is May. You say, hey, let's meet through the summer. And at the end of the summer, let's reevaluate. What is that going to do? It's going to let you see, are they hungry? Are they committed to meeting? Do they really want to go for this? At the end of the summer, they still want to do that. You say, you re-up on it. Or if they just flaked on you, they never showed up, they're just blowing their mind out with drugs, they don't care, then you're like, hey, we tried this, doesn't seem like it's really going anywhere. Let's just be bros, let's be friends. And, and you can end it. So there's a clear ending. So I always say we're going to do this for this amount of time. For me, I operate on semesters, so I'll typically start in September and say we'll meet through December and then reevaluate. So I did that with one guys group of all these men, and it was awesome. So I said, hey, let's meet now and through the spring. And now at the end of the spring, I got to it and can either end it or say, let's keep going. Does that make sense? Awesome question. Yes?
Have you ever had to turn down someone when they asked you to be their
Yeah. Now, here's what I find. There's not a ton of people that actually ask. Okay? Typically, you're the one that's asking. But yeah, I have had. So that's typically going to happen more for people that speak in places, because then you talk on discipleship and everyone's like, well, I'd like you to do, So, but say you go home and work with a youth group. You talk on discipleship, then who are the girls going to ask? They're going to come up and ask you. What I do is I do it in a group, okay? But yeah, there's some that you might have to go because what did Jesus do? Before he called his disciples, do you remember what he did? He went up on the hill, spent the night praying. So he actually prayed, and then it says he called those that he wanted, right? So my discipleship book will help you on this.
follow-up question?
Yep.
Do you try to give them another person? Do you try to put on another person?
Yes. That's a brilliant question. Okay, how many of you, when you go home, will probably be a small group leader? Okay. All the small group leaders sat together at this table. The main place to find disciples is in your small group. But you tap out. You get 3 and you're like, I'm full. And your disciples, some of your small groups will grow up to 30 people. And you keep having people come. Actually, my goal when I'm leading a small group is for people to be discipled. So then, Keely, say I'm discipling, you're discipling a girl named Renee. Then these new girls come in and you're like, hey, my dance card's full. Like I have too many people. But you're like, Renee, I see this new girl named Jennifer that just came in. She's younger. I'd like for you to disciple her. So the things I'm doing with you, why don't you initiate with her? And I'm going to do this with you on Monday. You just do the exact same thing on Thursday with her. So then you've just helped her get her first disciple and helped her multiply it. Does that make sense? So guys, the ultimate thing you can do, who of you guys are going to go home and invest in youth? You're going to invest in youth. Okay, so a bunch of you. This is the greatest thing you can do. Better than your programs, better than your messages, is making disciples of some of these youth, but then help these youth. So help the seniors invest in the sophomores. Help the high schoolers, the freshmen, disciple the middle schoolers. You following me? So you're not just making disciples, you're creating a discipleship culture. And a discipleship culture is what totally transforms life. That is why from a local church, we've gone around the whole world making disciples. The reason I have people that are willing to suffer, move to Indonesia, move to Morocco, when we talk to our missionaries, we're like, guys, you could die for the gospel. Why are they willing to do that? Because only disciples do that thing. Now remember this. There's disciples, okay? There's followers, and there's crowds. As you study the life of Jesus, right? Have you ever seen this before? There was about 12 disciples. Okay? Then there were the 72. Then there was the 120. Then there were the 5,000. Okay? Here's the thing, is not everyone wants to be a disciple. You guys want to be disciples. You wouldn't have spent a fortune to be at the school and then sat in this. You guys are the ones that want to be disciples. Your goal is to find the ones that want to be disciples. Okay? Now, do I neglect the crowds? No, I have a big church, and I preach to the crowds every weekend, but my primary investment in life is the disciples. Does that make sense? Okay.
I was just curious if you read the book Tom's Fan.
No, I've heard of it. Who's it by?
Ian
Yeah. No.
It's a lot of the
Yeah.
similarities.
Yeah.
How do you manage a career in discipleship?
Like, how do you balance a career and discipleship? Yeah, this is what my people do. This is if you make disciples of people in your career. So God calls people into this. Have you heard of the 7 spheres of society? Did y'all get that teaching? So society can be broken into 7 spheres primarily, 7 or 8. Some people call them the mountains. This is Campus Crusade has this teaching. YWAM has this teaching. Numerous people have this teaching where God calls people into the spheres of society. So it's like government, education, entertainment, medical. I'm blanking right now. Home and family. There's like seven spheres. You can just Google this. God calls people. So I love that you said mechanics. Are you talking about like working on machines or working on vehicles or something like that? Okay. Who do you think is going to best reach mechanics for the Lord? A pastor or a mechanic? Yeah, he speaks the same language, right? But if your goal is just to fix cars in life, cars aren't eternal, right? Who's eternal? The people that are bringing their cars, like it's a service that people need, and all the people working on them. And so who can a mechanic relate to is a guy like Zach that's on fire for Jesus, shining with the love of God. 70% of those people are never going to step a day of their life into a church unless they meet Zach and they see what's going on in his life. Are you following me? Okay. So how do you do it? Did you say you want to be a teacher? I mean, the best. Everyone has to go to school. So all of these teachers, you're in your workroom, and you walk in. There's a woman with her head in her hands, weeping, and what's happened? Her husband's just died, or her child has just died, and no one else knows what to do. But you know, because Jesus is in you. You go wrap your arm around her. I'm so sorry. Everyone needs a person of God in their time of need. When do people come to faith? They come to faith in crisis. Okay, remember that. People meet Jesus in crisis. I mean, read the Bible. People are always going after Jesus in crisis. My daughter's just died, right? I'm sick, right? That's when people are going. And so Maddie, you're in the teacher's lounge, and some woman is brokenhearted, and you go sit down. No one else knows what to do. You go put your arm around her, and you're there. Then you show up with the casserole for her family, and she breaks down, and you're like, you know where I found my hope? At the right time, you share Jesus. She gives her life to Jesus. And then the gospel starts moving. So I have a PE teacher in my men's group, okay? His principal is this super crazy, pushing like the transgender mandate. He's like pushing everything that would be against biblical teaching in a harsh way. And he comes to my gym teacher friend and says, hey, I'm probably going to have to fire you because we're having to make cuts. You know what my friend says to this principal who stands for everything different than he stands for? He goes, man, I'm sure you're under a lot of pressure. I'm going to pray for you. He said everything inside him was just ticked. He's like, I've served this school, I've worked, and this guy's saying he's going to fire me. The principal was so taken by that he said, can we meet? And my friend explains, I'm different because of Jesus. And the principal, who's like, stands for everything that us as Christians wouldn't, he says, can we start meeting together consistently? My friend is discipling his principal as a PE teacher, this PhD principal who's just total, just pushing every crazy ideology, and he's being discipled now by a Christian.
Discipled or evangelist?
No, well, exactly. Was everyone saved when Jesus started discipling them? Huh?
I said obviously not, because Jesus.
Well, was Peter saved when Jesus started discipling him? Was Peter saved? How do you get saved? If you what?
Profess with your mouth and believe in your heart.
That God,
He's Lord.
He's Lord, and that God,
Raised him from the dead.
was Jesus raised from the dead? Was Peter saved when, you following me? No, discipleship is discipling people that are saved, but you're also discipling some people. Some people you just share the gospel with. Some people you're just investing in. It's a slow train. You can disciple people that aren't Christians yet. That's what Jesus did. They weren't even Christians yet. So, he is discipling a guy. He's consistently investing in him. He's training him. This guy just hasn't crossed the line yet. The majority of people I disciple, the vast majority are Christians. But yeah, some people I'm discipling before they ever become Christians. Yes. I'm rocking your paradigm right now. I can see it.
Can you be a disciple maker without being discipled?
Yes.
You need to be discipled.
You need to be discipled. I encourage you to go home and find someone to disciple you. And I also know that not every one of you will be able to find that. But you received so much discipleship training. I've been discipling you these last 2 days. It's not one-on-one. I wish I had that. I wish I could do that. But you've received so much. You've received so much training. I'm teaching you to obey. So this is crash course discipleship. I'd love for each of you, though, to go home and ask someone to disciple you. The challenge is a lot of you guys are going to go back to places where people don't know how to make disciples. So you're going to have to be the one who starts. So my pastor who discipled me was never discipled. So he just picked up a lot of things from people and then just started discipling people. I was blessed to get discipled by one of the most amazing guys. Yep.
How do you determine when one of your groups is done?
Great question. I just feel it. So Sam, every season I just pray and say, God, what are you leading me to do? And I just have a sense from the Lord, oh, this is over, this is time to wrap up. And I'll leave them with a challenge, and I don't end the relationship. I'm like, guys, we're going to finish this group, but I'm here for you. You have my number anytime you need me. We're great friends. We built this great friendship. We're not going to do this group every week, or I'm not going to meet with you one-on-one every week, but I always want to be here for you. So anytime you need me, you got my number. I want to just be accessible to people and for them to know I'm there. And then in their time of need, they reach out to me. They call me, they ask me if I can, can we get lunch? Can we get coffee and meet together again? It's a great question.
So do you take that group after a semester and be like, I think we're done, or have you done it in the middle of one?
No, I always go to that. I always go through my commitment. So I'll say we're going to meet from here to here, and then we'll evaluate. So I think it's very important to be clear and to go with the commitment. So that's why I'm saying for you guys, you land, or say you're staying here. This is the beginning of the summer, right? It's May 15, 16, whatever today is. Hey, let's meet through the end of August, and let's reevaluate. Okay. One more question. And it can be about anything. Yes, sir.
What is a woman?
A woman
It's a rhetorical question.
is I know, but I want to actually answer it because I know that that no one did it. A woman has biological traits, femininity. She has a certain DNA. She has certain genes, and she's made in God's image. Right? That was awesome. She's a daughter of the King. Lord, thank you for these awesome, awesome students. And even right now, I pray that you'd be putting different ones in their minds and their hearts. And so many times I don't know who I'm going to disciple in the next season, but as I go back into my community, you just start highlighting people, you start revealing them to me. And Lord, you've just been investing so much in these students. And I pray that they would have the boldness to call people into discipleship. And then as they meet, the thing I found is that Philemon 1:6, I pray that you'd be active in sharing your faith so that you would know every good thing you have in Christ. That I've found that I fall more in love with you as I'm making disciples. And I pray that that's what they'd find. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. See you tomorrow.